Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the Darklands and the changes that Creative Assembly is bringing to this portion of the map with the Forge of the Chaos Dwarfs. There are some very substantial changes, and I also want to talk about the impact that these changes will have on already existing campaigns, like Kholek Suneater over here. I mean, Kholek is pretty substantial, has always been fairly substantial, especially because he can vassalize this endgame crisis that is Grimgor fairly quickly in his campaign. If you're willing to fight Grimgor early on, which you can, and you can win the battle, though it is pretty brutal, I'm not gonna lie to you. But if you do that, well, Grimgor just goes on a rampage. He conquers and conquers every faction you're at war with. In this case, I just had them conquer Greasus. So the ogres are under Grimgor's dominion now, and Grimgor is also about to invade Cafe. That is quite a fun experience. So looking at the broad changes of the Darklands, starting from the north, and then I'll touch on individual campaigns. So, in the north, you have the Goramandi Mountains, which is now a 4-settlement province. 4 regions to this province, and Karak Flag starts under the control of the Norskans over here, the Goramandi tribe. Yetkich is ruined, the Frozen Landing is ruined as well. That will have an impact on Boris Ursus, though I'll talk about him in just a moment. And outside of that, you have the Uskola Canal. Now, this canal takes you all the way here from the Goramandi Mountains to the Demon Stump over here in the Wolflands. So it's a way to get from north to south very, very quickly in this particular area of the campaign. Then you have Zorna's Skull. Not really any changes, just placement of some of these settlements. Astrogoth starts here. He starts at war with Dusty. Dusty used to control this entire province. He no longer does so. Instead, he has an army on the field that Astrogoth is always going to destroy on turn 1. And then there is a garrison over here in the fort. So there is a bit of a substantial force over here defending the fort in this particular province. Moving to the east, Saber Mountain is now controlled by the Saberskin, and it no longer has Grimgor's landmark. The Tusk Sons now start at war not with Grimgor, but with Kholek, who also still starts at war with the Flesh Greeders over here, who control the Challenge Zone from the very start, and they now have an Ogre camp right in Kholek's expansion path. The Granite Spikes have been moved from basically here, and there's this weird open space on the campaign map now, but the Granite Spikes have been moved from here into the Chaos Wastes, and they're now in the Stone Ski foothills, though it is still a mountain region, not a Chaos Wasteland region, which, yeah, I think that's a bit of an oversight. The Valerie is now the provincial capital of this province, and with 3 settlements at the moment as opposed to 2, and it has a pretty wonderful landmark for greenskins in general, hobgoblins or goblin units. This can reduce the upkeep of your units by quite a substantial amount at tier 3, if you do manage to get it. Zaytan obviously starts with it. If you play the Chaos Dwarves, you probably don't want to end up in a war with Zaytan, especially since you can let him do his thing and then eventually confederate him. And the Fortress of the Eye of Eyes is still part of this particular province. It's just the Granite Spikes haven't been added to this province for Zaytan's benefit. No other changes over here north of Cafe. Grimgor starts in Eagle Eries with the tier 2 settlement. He starts at war with the Ogres of the Folk. Now, moving over here in Zarnagrund, it starts as a tier 5 provincial capital with tier 3 minor settlements. They have a lot of buildings, though they have a lot of buildings, including the minor the garrison buildings in the settlements, though they're lacking a garrison building in the capital. I think Creative Assembly was of the thought process that, well, we put a full stack under Gorf the Cruel to defend it. It's a tier 5 settlement, so it's got 20 units to defend it itself. And then you've got the second army under Syra. People are not going to be able to overcome that, and then people did. Now, granted, to some extent, it's abusing the Nasty Skulker mechanic, it's abusing the stealth mechanics of games, sure, fair enough. But someone like Grimgor or even Kholek, you can certainly play the campaign and gain control over the capital of Zarnagrin. And it's actually harder for Kholek than Grimgor, because Grimgor can get to armies, can get to pretty large and powerful armies fairly quickly in his campaign. I mean, Kholek has a stronger individual force, sure, but Grimgor just brings 2 or even 3 forces, and the garrison, well, if you assault the settlement, you're likely going to lose the street battle. What you do is you lure the defenders out of the settlement, because they'll think, oh, we can win this on the field, and you lure them out of the settlement, and that's how you win. But you do need to have a fairly substantial force to do so. Now, over here in the Blasted Wastes, it's 4 regions, 4 settlements, with the Silver Pinnacle under the control of the Lamian Sisterhood. And then you have this minor greenskin faction under Dusty. I think just looking at this, just based on this kind of development over here, you have the second Dusty. You have Dusty 1.0 and Dusty 2.0. What is this creative assembly? Are these guys just brothers or clones or something along those lines? Either way, regardless of that though, like I think looking at this, it's quite possible that the next DLC is going to be Neferata's DLC. We see in Draziv's quest battle that he fights a combined force of Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts, and people have taken that as the developers hinting at Nagash. So we might get Nagash, we might get Neferata as well. Like just looking at the Silver Pinnacle, it starts as a tier 2 settlement, but with most of the province now no longer under their control and instead under the control of the Dripping Fangs, I'm just thinking to myself, ooh, this is how a campaign is going to be. We're going to get the Legendary Lord here, right? And who else is it going to be except Neferata? Though, we'll see about that. By the way, you have the Dripping Fangs controlling most of this province. Then you have the Overlords, Chaos Dwarves, minor Chaos Dwarf faction over here in the Wolflands. They control the entire province from the very beginning. There is a pretty good landmark over here for certain races, like specifically Chaos Dwarves, especially will benefit from this province, and also the Gates of Zar. So you want to probably wipe these guys out in your own right if you're playing the Chaos Dwarves, because they do have quite a lot of useful. This province would be useful. I think that with these guys, Creative Assembly wanted to add a faction that you fight as the Chaos Dwarfs, because these guys actually do despise you if you're playing any of the Legendary Lords of the Chaos Dwarfs. Now, getting into the Desolation of Asgore, Crookback Mountain is still where Tretch starts, though his starting army is now in a different position, because he used to start here at war with the Moonhowlers, but now the Moonhowlers control Mount Silverspear, and Mount Silverspear has been moved around. So it used to be that Mount Silverspear would be in a province with the tower over here, but now the tower is its own province in the Wolflands, and Mount Silverspear has been added to Tretch's own province, and Tretch is probably going to take it on turn 1. And Mount Greyhag is his next objective. The Darkhold is now part of the Howling Wastes, which is Draziv's province, and Draziv starts a war with the Darkland Orcs, who control the Sentinels and who control the Darkhold. The Ogres that used to control the Black Fortress have been removed. And those are really the major changes. Nothing changed for Emmerich in his starting province, nothing changed for Gorst, or rather something did change for Gorst, but not really too substantial of a situation. And those are the major Darkland changes. Now let me talk about individual campaigns of already existing Legendary Lords and the impact that these changes have on their campaigns, especially the major ones. I'm not going to talk about all of them, because like what's different for instance for Tretch, if we're talking about it. Oh, he no longer goes from Crookback Mountain into Mount Greyhag into the Darkhold. Okay, instead he just takes this province, and then you get to decide what you want to do with Tretch. That is a change, but it's not as substantial as you might think. There are, however, some Legendary Lords, already existing Legendary Lords, that have very different campaigns because of these changes. So the first Legendary Lord that does get affected by the Darklands changes is Boris Ursus. It is important to understand that Boris Ursus can colonize the Wasteland territory. So all the Darklands can belong to him, effectively, in his campaign. Now, he starts in the Northern Chaos Wastes, But it's the worst possible decision to stay over here. Instead, the best thing you can do in the current live version is to go to the Frozen Landing. In the current live version, it's under the control of the Goromani tribe. But now it's a ruin. This actually suits you in quite a few ways, says Boris, because it means you can avoid declaring war on this tribe. And this can suit you because it means that what happens in the live version is you come here, you take the Frozen Landing, and these guys pull out, which benefits Prague. But you don't want Prague to benefit from that situation because you want them to be weak so you can confederate them. Or you want to wipe them out. So one of the things you want to achieve as Boris Ursus is you actually want to achieve a military alliance. So what are you going to do in the current situation? Well, you still take the Tower of Torment, you still do a bunch of recruitment of Cossars, and you still go over, like you spend 2 turns locally and globally recruiting Cossars, then you come over here, take the Frozen Landing, settle it. It's still worth it because it's still a major caravan destination. Like if you get 1 or 2 caravans, you can get so much money as Boris Ursus, and you still have one of the most powerful early game armies in this entire area because you've got 2 tier 3 units, 2 tier 2 units, 2 tier 4 units in the War Bear Riders, which are very substantial. And Kislev Kossars aren't too bad in their own right. So you can take the Frozen Landing, and then you can, of course, go to war with the Norskans, or you can take Yetkich and sell it to Prague and start building those relations. In fact, it might be a good idea to just sell every territory you're gaining, including the Frozen Landing, to Prague. That way you will eventually achieve a military alliance. And then what do you do with the military alliance? You declare war on Frot, which will put pressure on Prague, and once Frot has done some damage to Prague, you can confederate them. Simple strategy. Though you may want to keep the Frozen Landing for a couple of turns, build up, get the Lord, get some global recruitment. Though you should also keep the Tower of Torment for a while. You can build an army. Depends on how much money you're getting, which depends on whether or not you're getting a caravan. But you could go for that, or you could outright conquer this entire province and then conquer Prague, or just take it slower. Left for Prague to build up. Eventually, they should be a prime confederation target. But you could still play Boris Ursus' campaign like, okay, I take this province, I sell it to Prague, then I confederate Prague, and then I go all the way into Sylvania because they have a gold mine. That's the current situation in the campaign, but it's not necessarily what you can do right now. Instead, what you can do right now is come here, take this entire province, maybe take out the Skaven as well in the Skull Road, or ignore them as best as you can, though they are likely to declare war on either you or Prague, so you might want to wipe them out. And maybe sell this province to Archeon, though that is a bad idea in a lot of ways. And then go over here into the Darklands and conquer the Darklands. So what they've done with this decision is they've opened up another opportunity of expansion for Boris Ursus. I would still probably say that going into Sylvania is the better decision, but there's some fairly substantial benefits in going into the Darklands right now. There's more settlements, there's more regions, there's more rewards for doing so. So I would say if you're playing Boris Ursus right now, you could play the Darklands campaign. Hell, you could play the Darklands campaign in Realms of Chaos. It was pretty awful doing so in Realms of Chaos, and I think his campaign is not really improved in Realms of Chaos. But right now, it might be worth it. Or you could just, wipe out Astrogoth, go over here, take the Silver Pinnacle, and then attack Azak to take him out at a good moment of opportunity. Basically, you have reasons right now to head east in a sense, or southeast, as opposed to heading just directly south into Sylvania. Because at the moment in current live version, it's just a smarter thing to obviously come here, deal with the Norskans, then deal with Frot, confederate Prague along the way, or just conquer Prague, deal with Frot, sell Help It to Krakadronk so they hold the line, start making those deals with Katrin and Kastaltin, then come over here to Sylvania, conquer it, and conquer the Ostermark as well, deal with Draika, deal with Azak. Actually, Draika and Azak will deal with each other, so by the time you arrive as Boris, that's the best opportunity to wipe both of them out and gain a lot of money in the process. But now you can decide not to do that. You can go down a different path. The second campaign that will see a major change is, of course, Kholek Suneater's campaign over here. He still starts at war with the Ogres, the Flesh Greeders, and he still will take the Challenge Stone on turn 1, though there's now an Ogre camp over here. But he also starts at war with the Tusked Sons over here, who do have 2 full armies. though they're going to be fairly easy enough to deal with. Take their territory, just take it. Don't give it to Dolgan, as the game would suggest you should. Then take the Saber Mountain, or take this settlement, take Blizzard Peak, and ignore everything else. And instead, what you can do, and maybe what you should do, is you take Blizzard Peak, right? You recruit as many units along the way, and you move Kholek here to this particular point, and then you go to attack Grimgor either when he's in Gorge Rock or when he's moving on Carrick Frag, because he's going to move on Carrick Frag because he's at war with the Folk, and he's going to get a provincial capital. I believe this is where his landmark is as well. So I'll check that out in just a bit. By the way, Grimgor can obviously be a substantial asset if you vassalize him as Kholek. This is the case in the live version. This is still the case with the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves. So you can still do it. The way you would do it in the live version is you would just rush through the challenge stone directly south, ignore everything, or maybe take Ice Pure, or just ignore everything. Recruit as many units, regimented around Hill Cannon, and then because Grimgor will spend some turns recruiting over here in Saber Mountain, and then get the second army. If you're playing on a high difficulty, you'll get the second army, or rather a second lord. You can attack that second lord, but that means dealing with the full stack of Grimgor, as well as the garrison of Saber Mountain, and of course that second lord that Grimgor has. Here you can avoid fighting the garrison, though Grimgor might have two full armies on the field, two full proper armies on the field over here by the time you encounter him. So either it's still a harsh battle, but you can still confederate Grimgor over here in this campaign. And after that, well, you have Zaytan to the east, who is also a prime confederation target, though Grimgor is going to hate it if you do that, by the way. But you can keep Grimgor happy by giving him a lot of the territory, like take the path to the east and just sell it to Grimgor. And yeah, maybe get Zaytan very quickly, or go north to deal with Archeon, or go west to deal with Astrogoth, or do all of them at once, or do all of them throughout the course of the campaign at different points. One of the things you may not be equipped to deal with as Kholek, at least not initially, is taking the Dark Fortress over here. Grimgor can do it, but Grimgor can recruit nasty Skulkers, and Grimgor can bring a lot of armies. You may not be able to do so. Though if you want to pick the fight with Tsar Nagrun, that is your decision, and it's certainly a winnable fight if you play well enough. Personally, I did ignore it. When I played the Kholek campaign recently, I did ignore it for a fair amount of time, and instead focused on vassalizing Zaytan, focused on vassalizing Astrogoth, because there's substantial benefits in terms of income, in terms of military support if you do so, and it's probably best to just do it quickly, get it out of the way, and give them time to rebuild. Like, if you can vassalize a powerful Legendary Lord quickly, and Zaytan and Astrogoth both are powerful Legendary Lords. They're not Grimgor level, but they're still pretty capable. And then, once you vassalize Grimgor, by the way, maybe giving him 2 turns to recover and all that, sold him a bunch of territory, just declare war on old ogres that you encounter, and watch Grimgor conquer all of them. Or declare war on them one at a time, let Grimgor conquer them one at a time, and then declare war on the next, and the next, and the next, until you have Grimgor controlling the entirety of the Mountains of Morn. You don't want the Mountains of Morn yourself. What you want are the Dark Fortresses. Some of the Dark Fortresses. Though I would probably leave the Valkyrie to Zaytan, because the Chaos Dwarves can give you a substantial benefit in terms of income in your campaign if they do actually have a provincial capital. You shouldn't take the view that, oh, I don't want to make my vassals too powerful. You can make them powerful, but you also got to keep in mind that you do need to sell them territory in order to keep them happy, because the Chaos Dwarves are not going to like the Greenskins are not going to like the Chaos Dwarves. So you need to be careful on how you do it, but it's very possible to go for an entire campaign without having a vassal betray you. You just got to keep in mind, you can't expect vassals to stick with you if, one, you're vassalizing factions that they hate, races that they hate, and 2, they won't stick around as powerful Legendary Lords if you don't give them territory at all throughout the campaign. So it is an annoying thing to manage vassals, absolutely, and I'm not too fond of the Warriors of Chaos, but Kholek does certainly has a major impact in his campaign over here, because he now has 3 Legendary Lords that he can vassalize pretty quickly in his campaign, as opposed to just Grimgor. I mean, just Grimgor was good enough, but now he can get 3, and those 3 are pretty solid in their own right. Then, of course, there is Grimgor. Grimgor now starts in the Eagle Eyries. He starts at war with the Ogres, as I mentioned, the Folk. And his landmark, his fort, the big fort, has been moved from Saber Mountain into Karak Flag. So he doesn't actually care about Saber Mountain anymore, or the path to the east. Now, this does give you some advantages in terms of diplomacy with Kholek. You don't necessarily want to fight Kholek if you're playing Grimgor. What you can do, however, is obviously take Gorge Rock on turn 1, then go for Blizzard Peak. And the leader over here of the Red Tusks is Harda full of teeth, right? Harder full of teeth, okay. Who is over here. He's got a second army that Grimgor was meant to defeat early on, but you can confederate these guys very quickly and then actually sell the territory to Kholek in order to make Kholek happy. And after that, you have plenty of opportunities in your campaign. You do have a landmark in the Valerie, which is actually fairly substantial in terms of giving you minus 15% upkeep for goblins over here. And of course, you do have this 4-region province. But one of the things you can achieve early on in your campaign is actually wipe out Gorf the Cruel. I think that what Creative Assembly needs to do to prevent this from happening, by the way, some people have said, oh, they should nerf it. I'm like, why should they nerf a player doing something good in terms of like actually playing their campaign well? Because you can take them out without just abusing Nasty Skulkers. If you abuse Nasty Skulkers, you can do it faster, fair enough. But you can genuinely win on the field of battle against these armies with Grimgor if you're being very aggressive and taking a lot of territory quickly and building a lot of armies very quickly to throw against the Chaos Dwarf capital. But what I think they could do over here is starting them out with the Red Crake mortar building and also start them out at like, I don't know, rank 20 over here as opposed to rank 1. Because right now he is pretty pathetic. He's not even worth using if you confederate him. Like, you do want to confederate him if you're playing the Chaos Dwarves. But I think that would be something that Creative Assembly could do in order to make it less appealing to just rush Zarnagrund and take a tier 4 capital. Because it starts tier 5, but you will obviously take it 1 level lower. By the way, as Grimgor, you do take a Karak Vrag. And then you might want to take Saber Mountain and sell the territory to Kholek. Get a good diplomatic deal with Kholek, then march over here to deal with Zaytan, take his territory for yourself, and then just kind of stop. It is going to be a drain on your territory over here, but you do have good growth, and you can overcome the issues of control, growth, and construction cost as the Greenskins, and get a fairly substantial landmark, the Tomb of Kangol Khan over here. And then, yeah, just do whatever you want. You're Grimgor. You can do whatever you want. Like, wipe out Astrogoth, wipe out the other Greenskins, wipe out Zarnagrund if you so desire, go for Greases. It's really up to you what you want to do in this campaign. Mind you, it's not going to be a walk in the park to do all of these things, but that's, I think, the great thing about what they've done about Grimgor's campaign and other campaigns in general. I'm getting a very strong vibe with a lot of the campaigns right now of the Darklands, similar to Alifanar. Like I said, Alifanar is one of the best campaigns in the game, if not the best campaign in the game, because it is a hard campaign, but you have all the tools necessary to succeed in that. And that's certainly the sentiment I'm getting with virtually all the campaigns that start over here in the northern part of the Mountains of Morn, in the northern part of the Darklands. And it would be interesting for Boris Ursus to actually have a challenge on his hands, because Boris Ursus just dominates everyone around him. Like, he annihilates Froth because of his army. He wipes out the Norskins and all that, so even as Boris Ursus, it would be fairly interesting. That, of course, leaves the southern part of the Darklands, and to be honest, I wouldn't necessarily say things have changed too much in the southern part of the Darklands. I mean, yes, if you're playing Emmerich, you're likely going to end up at war with Astrogoth, but like just outside of having to fight Astrogoth, nothing really, and having to fight Tretch, nothing really substantial has changed in the way that campaigns are played over here. Whereas in the northern part, things have changed in a fairly significant fashion. Because one, you now have 4 legendary lords in this area. And you also have like Boris Ursus, if you're playing him, who might join in the fun. Whereas here in the south, you just have the addition of an extra legendary lord, as well as some minor territorial changes as well. I think Shambletown wasn't part of Noblar country, for instance. Could be wrong on that. But it's really in the north that the most drastic changes have taken place, not in the south. That's all there is to say. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.